Welcome to the PIO Podcast, a place for everything public information related for police, fire, EMS, and local governments.
It was a good learning experience for a lot of us that social media is not real life.
But we have to remember the media are very rarely a target audience. They're simply that conduit.
Our words have impacts on individuals, and it may not be positive. So just being thoughtful and mindful of the words that we speak.
I think what's so interesting about this position too, and this job and this profession, is that every one of us is looking for purpose, and when we find it here, that's it.
To know is that a crisis for one is not necessarily a crisis for another.
Hey everybody, just wanted to get on here real quick and ask everybody if they enjoyed our content, if they've listened to us, if they want to keep us going, to help support the show. And you can do that by going down to the bottom of the show notes of today's episode and clicking the link and giving us a sponsorship or even just a one-time donation. That'll really help us keep this podcast going and keep us giving you new content. Thanks everybody. Enjoy today's episode. Today at the PIO Podcast, we have Stephanie Bishop. She's the National Public Information Officer for the California Interagency Incident Management Team. Thank you for being on the show, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
So, Stephanie, let's talk about your background because it's extensive, and I would like our listeners to know about your background. So give us a rundown of your background.
So I'm retired law enforcement. I did law enforcement for 18 years. On a federal level and also local level. I retired out of Denver, Colorado. I specialized in child crimes and human trafficking when I was in the law enforcement realm. Prior to law enforcement, I did about 4 years at one of our fire departments before jumping over to the law enforcement world. Retiring in 2018, I was up in the Alaska area and I got a job with the state of Alaska Department of Natural Resources. And I also worked with one of the boroughs up there in emergency management operations. So that's kind of how I fell into the realm of where I'm at now and started doing public information and liaison work with incident management teams across the nation.
Wow. Okay. So you're all over the place. I mean, going from Colorado to Alaska, that's your typical, not your normal kind of transition there, is it?
No, it's not. I'm a military spouse, so I once I retired, I was able to follow my husband around a little bit more, and that's his latest duty station was up in Alaska. So
let's kind of just jump into some of the things that you know and your knowledge, because I think tapping into your knowledge and your experience is going to be beneficial for the listeners. Can you describe communication protocols that are in place during an incident? Can you just kind of get the generics?
Yeah, I can kind of go over it. And I mean, it's communication protocols are essential, not just during an incident, but I always feel like it's something that needs to be done prior to an incident. So prior to like an incident management team coming into a community, hopefully there's some protocols already in place by the emergency operations center there, the emergency management, or even your local police and fire agencies. And then I like to build off of those protocols if they have them, because they've already tested them, utilized them, and know that what works and what's effective. But when we're going into those protocols, I look at notification is one of those protocols that we need to know, like notifying. How are we going to notify our stakeholders in our communities? Who needs to be notified first? What is the information that they need to be told right away in the initial incident? And then how do we build off of that information of what's going out? And then is there an escalation criteria? Like, what is the criteria that's going to escalate the incident, and what steps are we going to need to be bringing in more resources, or what we're going to do? And then the other one is like communication channels. Or what are we going to use? Email, social media, conference calls. They're going to depend on our public and who our stakeholders are to be informed. There's going to be different ways that we're informing them. Clarifying who the roles and responsibilities are, doing a definition of who's involved, who's got what roles, who's communicating information, who's coordinating response efforts, and who's providing updates. And then just information sharing, outlining on how and when the information is going to be shared, not just externally, but also internally. We've got to also keep the team members or those working the incident also informed of stuff. And post incident, a review. Initially, after it's all over, let's do a review and how did we do? What can we do better? What was successful? What wasn't successful? So I like to, when I come into an incident, utilize whatever protocols are already in system and then build off of those.
So, Steph, real quickly, some of the things that you've handled in your background, obviously, I'm assuming wildfires in the Denver area, that had to be a common thing. And then being up in Alaska, I mean, there's always some kind of disaster that happens up there, whether it's them shooting down what they thought was a UFO or like the Exxon Valdez.
Yeah. So up in Alaska, you could be dealing with wildfires, and then it'll move into flooding season, and then you might have a huge winter storm seasons. So we're really good up there. The state of Alaska emergency management and then the local borough emergency managements are very good at helping their communities be prepared for any type of season and what could happen and what may happen. And then, but when I was in Alaska, the biggest one I responded to, November 2018, we had a huge earthquake. That was my first earthquake I've ever been in. It was a 7.1. So that was an experience for me. But having worked with that borough a few months prior in emergency management, I had a good understanding of what the protocols were going to be when it came out and how we were going to lay out our communications and directly answer and respond to the community. And overall, you want to be that timely and accurate information right away. So you want to inform the community right away what's going on, or they're going to get their information somewhere else and it's not going to be accurate and it's not going to be the best type of information to have for them to have. We want to be the information source.
Okay, so that jumps into my next question. How do we ensure timely and accurate information is disseminated to the public? How do we do that?
So, I mean, like I said, emergency management organizations that work within our communities on a regular basis, they're building those community trust and managing expectations on a regular basis. So when I'm coming in as an incident management team, I want to work closely with those emergency management offices, the local fire departments, as well as the law enforcement offices, because they have something in place. So I want to work with them to help build off of that trust that they've already obtained with the stakeholders and communities. So what we're going to do is, like, once we get there, we're going to make sure we're providing the regular updates and on all the platforms, what's going to the stakeholders as well as the community. We're going to designate a spokesperson for the incident. Who's going to be the one that's most well-informed and has the best ability to talk on a topic? Because I know everybody says, well, you're the public information officer. I am an information officer, but I'm not always the best person to talk on a topic. My role and responsibility is to find that most accurate person that could be the best spokesperson for the incident, answer the questions, and also and then prepare them for the type of questions that they're going to get and what kind of information is going out there. And most importantly, we want to remain transparent through the whole incident of what's going on, how it can impact the community, the stakeholders, what actions are being done. And we're going to tailor messages different to the different audience, like our stakeholders versus our community. But we're also going to do it towards, maybe we're in a community that is Spanish speaking only, or up in Alaska, we had a lot of Russian speaking, or just the local languages of the tribes up there. So we want to tailor that message to make sure it's meeting the needs of who our community is, or even 508 compliant for our American Disability Act and following those. And then it's important for us to remain not just engaged with our stakeholders in our going to the coordinating meetings, but also engage with our public. Reading through, like, if we're using social media, what kind of comments are they asking? What kind of questions are they asking that we might be able to address? Or if we're going to do daily updates that are video daily updates, my spokesperson, can they address some of those questions that one person might have, but most people might have, they just didn't ask it. And then I want to coordinate with the partners that are involved and make sure that we're sharing the same messages, that we have the same message going out. And a lot of times we'll do that through like a joint information system, or JIS is what they call it. And of course, we want to make sure we're managing media requests because we don't want to ignore them. They're going to be the ones helping us get our message out to a wider audience.
Steph, you just brought something up that I've just started to see recently, like on a regular basis, the 504 compliance and the use of American Sign Language interpreters or some other method. And the funny thing is, for the longest time, even during the pandemic, they always had that person standing way off to the side. They weren't in camera view. I don't know who they were talking to off camera because they weren't there. But now, in like a couple of the most recent mass shootings that have occurred, I've seen them right there, front and center. Is that a result of the legislation, or is that something different?
I don't know if it's a result of legislation or them, because I haven't seen specific legislation come out about it, or them just looking back afterwards at doing that post-incident review and saying, oh, you know what, our 508, our sign language person was way off the camera. We need to do better. But I'll tell you who does an excellent job of making sure ASL and everything is Arizona. Arizona, to me, has laid out a good pipeline, because anytime they have an incident or anytime they're doing any type of press conferences or anything, they are required to have a sign language interpreter there with them. And they also have a closed captioning person that is there doing the closed captioning at the same time. So I feel like, and I work out of California a lot, but I do get to come down into Arizona and work a lot with them. I feel like Arizona is the big person that we should be looking at of how they do it, because it's not just, I mean, we have ADA compliant, it's in our regulations to do, but you don't see that across the nation. A lot of people even doing it. However, Arizona went one step further and made it a state law. So every time they do any type of press conference or anything, there is a ASL and closed caption person there captioning everything that's going on.
And you still don't see it even with the extremely large agencies like the Chicago or NYPD or LAPD. You see it sometimes, but certainly not on all the press conferences.
Let's look at our White House briefings. Do you see it at the White House briefings? No.
And those are kind of laughable. I always use those.
That's our top layer of public affairs right there, is those White House briefings. So, I mean, that should be rolling down across the nation, but it's not, because it's not even at that top layer. So I always look at, Arizona, and Arizona has for several years been doing it this way.
Outstanding. Well, that'll be something I'll have to look at and see what they're doing, what their procedures are. Can you talk about key components of a crisis communication plan?
Yeah. So I'm what they would call, if you talk to anybody, I call it strategic communications, or a lot of times I'd call it the strategic information plan, because on an incident, you have a communications section that was working all the radios, and then you have the information section. So I don't want people to think, oh, this is where I'm going to go get my radio information. So I call it the strategic information plan. And in that plan, it's going to outline our approach to communicating with stakeholders across the incident. And it's going to identify what our overall goals are, our target audience, our key messages we want to get out. It's going to identify roles and responsibility. It's going to give us a timeline, our communication method, how we're going to monitor that, and then like an evaluation, how we're going to evaluate it. So to me, I feel like every government agency out there should have some type of crisis information plan and messaging prepared for when it happens. And every incident I go on, I have a generic one I start with, but based off of the incident, it's going to change per incident, and I'm going to build off of my generic one and start building it so it's incident specific.
Okay, and that would go directly into my next question about coordinating with other agencies and organizations to maintain that unified message, correct?
Yes. Yeah, so when you have an incident such as, like, we'll just take a wildfire, for example. One of the wildfires I worked on was the Mosquito Fire. The Mosquito Fire dealt with 2 different national forests, dealt with 3 different sheriff's departments. It also had CAL FIRE involved because it had some state land. So that's 6 agencies that I, as a information officer, am coordinating with. And so those 3 different sheriff's agencies are responsible for evacuation messaging and stuff. So it's essential that I'm sharing that information immediately when they push it out. Well, if they're 20 minutes or 20 miles away from where I am, and vice versa with all these other ones. It's better for us to do kind of like a joint information center and become a unified as one and bring them into the incident so that we're working in the same room together. And I can have one sheriff's department saying, I'm pushing out new evacuation orders now. And I can tell whoever I have it working underneath my Intel social media branch, pay attention and start pushing that information out. And then if we have major information going out in regards to the fire, I can have turn to them right there because they're in the same room and say, hey, this is what's going on, and it's going out. And so we're working together to make sure we're doing a unified message about what's going on. But we also know the roles and responsibilities of who is the roles and responsibilities to push out what messaging.
And now, a word from our sponsor. In today's climate, you need to be able to communicate, whether you're communicating to those you serve, your peers, or your constituents. Whether you're looking for professional development or to work with a professional, John Guilfoyle Public Relations has you covered. From crisis communications to website development, visit our website at jgpr.net or call us directly at 617-993-0003 to get started today. We'll help you tell your story strategically. Now let's return back to our episode.
Steph, what strategies are you using to address misinformation or rumors? Because that's something that is inevitable in almost every incident.
Yeah, so one of the things is I have what we call an Intel social media branch. And within that Intel social media branch, they are monitoring all the social media out there, such as I think it's not Twitter anymore, it's X. We have YouTube channels, you have your local Facebook channels, you have your community pages within the Facebook channel. So a lot of times what I have them do is they're just scrolling through social media and looking up hashtag mosquito fire, what kind of information is being put out there, and they're trying to find it, and they're seeing what rumors are out there, and they're jumping on that so that we can get correct information out there, because it's crucial for us to maintain that trust and with the public and stakeholders, and that we are that primary source of information that's coming out there, because we don't want any panic to ensure from inaccurate information. We want to make sure that it's accurate, that we're keeping, people are already going through a stressful time as it is anyway with whatever event it might be or incident we're dealing with. We want to help alleviate some of that stress by them being able to go to the appropriate place to get that accurate information. So it's important for me to come to my local people and say, what established trusted information sources do you have? We all have there's always those community leaders that people really go to. I want to make friends with them and, get to know them and have them help me share that information. If people are going to go to them for the information, they can say they're sharing it directly from the incident team or the incident management people that are managing that incident, as well as, I want to be quick to correct false information that's out there. I want to clearly state that the correct information and provide sources that they can go to get the correct information. It's also important that we educate the public through the incident on how they can be preventable on future incidences or what they can do, because this is also a time that we can alleviate that. We've got the attention of our communities. Let's take that and put messages out there about prevention in the future and everything. And then just making sure that we have regular updates going out about the information. And once we get there, we're established and we're working within that joint information system and joint information center with it on that unified message. And we're all pushing where they can go to get the direct information.
Stephanie, this intelligent social media person, would that be like something along the lines of a VOST?
Yeah. Sometimes, yes. A lot of times I like to have that person right there. I don't do a lot of virtual stuff, but we do have, there's times that we're just not getting the personnel to cover some. So some of that stuff might be a virtual person. But I do like to have as much people more in person, because if it's an incident that is ever changing and the dynamics, it's just easier to be in the same room, share the information, than it is to share the information, pick up the phone, or communicate with that virtual person to make sure they've got the information accurately. But don't get me wrong, having virtual people are also a godsend too, and they do help out when you need it.
And jumping into and going to this next question, what role, and I know you've kind of already mentioned it, what role social media plays, but how else does it play into the communication strategy? I know you're pushing out, evacuation routes and that, but what other roles does it play?
So when you're listing in your communication strategy, when you're talking about it, you have, these are my goals, my objectives. Well, then part of how I'm going to meet my objectives is I'm laying out communication methods, and social media is one of my major communication methods of communicating. I mean, we're in the century we are where everybody is social media savvy these days, but it's where I'm showing that I'm pushing those information out and how I'm doing it, how I'm monitoring it. And it also allows me to see what kind of feedback I'm getting. Is my community responsive to it? And what kind of feedback are they giving me? Are they saying, thank you for this information? Are they giving us kind of it's kind of like, what are they giving us praises for what we're doing? Are we doing it accurately? But it's not the only communications avenue I'm going. I mean, I have what we call trap lines, which are major points in the area that people traffic a lot on foot, and I'm putting information in those areas. I also will have roving trap liners who, if we're in a major area such as like Lake Tahoe, and off of Highway 50 and Lake Tahoe's closed, or Highway 50 was closed, but you open it and they're still seeing smoke, I'm going to have people out there. So if people are pulled over looking, they can stop and talk to them and give them information about what they're seeing. So there's different avenues.
So you're
out
going to
there.
put you're going to put a physical person out at an intersection like that instead of like an electronic sign or something?
Yep.
Okay.
So, yep. I mean, we call them the roving trap line. Those are people that are informed, have information. They're driving up and down major thoroughways. If they see people pulled over looking at a smoke column or looking at some stuff, we're going to have them stop, talk to them, see if they have questions, and do that. And then I might have someone on the Crooks Fire in Prescott National Forest in 2023 or 2022. They had a lot of events going on in that area. We had people at those events with a little booth set up, giving information about the fire that was going on in the area, what they can expect. I might have them stationed outside of Costco. Costco gets tons of people that go in and out of it, and we're giving information. And, we're collecting the data of how many contacts we make a day. And on some of those, you're making 500 to 1,000 contacts a day. Some of them, maybe you're only doing 100, but you're still contacting and making connections with 100 people. So social media is not the only one.
Right. And those personal contacts multiply because you end up having them tell other people. They end up telling other people the information that you provided.
Exactly.
Steph, so we've already kind of talked about diverse communities and how you guys address that, especially different dialects and languages up in Alaska and so on, then the 504 thing. But let's jump onto this other one. What measures are you putting in place to protect sensitive information from being released to the public?
So one thing I do, I mean, that's a good balance between transparency and confidentiality. And if I'm working in an area that has cultural sensitivity, like some of the fires that we're dealing with or some of the incidents we're dealing with on national forest or BLM land or BIA land, you're dealing with their local natives too. And they have some cultural sensitivities out there. So it's just about us working with them about what information can we put out about the area and what's going on, because we don't want to disrupt any of their cultural sensitivities when we're out there working, but we want to put information out there about the work that is being done too. So it's about really working with the stakeholders involved on what kind of information we can put out and how we can word that information.
Let's take a quick break.
When you think about propaganda, you probably think about Kim Jong-un and his funny little haircut. And you'd be exactly right. The podcast, This Is Propaganda, doesn't want you to believe that. They want you to question the ads you see, the news you read, the brands you love. What they don't want you to question is that they are advertisers themselves, peddling the same tricks they claim you fall for to make a living. If you need something to boycott, look no further than this show. Don't listen to This Is Propaganda.
Okay. And you had alluded to this previously, but how do you evaluate the effectiveness of your communications plan efforts post incident? And is there anything else you could add into this discussion today?
It's always that after action review. No matter what you do, it's that after action review. It's talking with the agency that you came in to assist with, getting feedback from them. How did we do? Did we, are the stakeholders happy with the information we provided? Are our communities happy? And we look at that, and that's an everyday evaluation that we're doing too. At the end of the day, we're evaluating. Did we meet the needs of the community? Because overall, when we come in and there's an incident, we are serving that community that we're there to do. That's my number one priority, is that community, and working with them and helping them and making sure they're informed. So it's just a daily evaluation, and then working with the agency that brought you in. Did we meet their needs, or can we do something better next time?
Right, and it's interesting. Go ahead.
The other thing I guess I could also bring in is you could look at the media coverage that happened on the incident, and how did the media portray the information we were putting out there? Because a lot of times these days, the media is not coming directly to us to get the information. It's the information we're putting out there. They're just taking it and reporting the information we put out. So if we're doing a daily video update, we'll see sometimes that part of that video update on a media outlet when they're talking about the incident. So that's another great way for us to evaluate how we did.
Right. And I was thinking about this. Fire departments and emergency services have done this for years. They've always done the hot wash afterwards. They've always done the after action. Law enforcement has always been very slow to do that for fear of critique and so on. So that's something that now they're starting to do more, but they could still do a much better job in it.
Yeah. No, and law enforcement wise, I started my law enforcement career with Columbine High School shooting. That's kind of how I started my career. I was, in the Colorado area, so I was also there with the theater shootings and stuff like that. And I can say, having been and experienced those mass areas that happened in Colorado, we did get better. I did see an improvement from Columbine up to that incident of how we did do some, sitting down, what is the best, what efforts have we done really good, and what can we do better in the future. SWAT teams do it all the time, honestly. Every time they go out, they are evaluating themselves.
And they're the pinnacle of it, so they should be doing it, and I would expect that. But it's interesting, the generic, even just a minor incident, very rarely does the police department sit down with everybody a day later or 2 days later and say, hey, what could we have done better? And then I think sometimes as leadership and sometimes even just down to the sergeant or the shift commander on that shift saying, hey, we're gonna go over this real quick, and what could we have done better?
And I will say that sitting in some of the briefings after we had major incidents, the next day when we came in a briefing, we would talk about it. Or if another say day shift had an incident and we were coming into afternoon briefing, we'll talk about the incident they had. And it's an awareness for us to keep our eyes out. Could happen again on our shift. And it's also like maybe we're going in and taking over for that shift in some areas so that they can be relieved of duty for the day and we can help take over. We kind of need to know what's going on.
Great. It's Steph, anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think did I cover your questions very accurately?
Yeah, you pretty much, yeah, you did. You covered all of them. That's why I wanted to see if you had anything else maybe that came to mind, but that's perfect. So let's switch this up. Let's go to some rapid fire. Oh, go ahead. I
would say really quick, one of the big things is anybody who's coming into public information or public affairs area, get out there as much as you can on some incidences and see how the incidences operate, because that's great, valuable information you can bring back to help you prepare in your role, your everyday role as information in public affairs. And take as much training classes as possible, because there's a wealth of knowledge out there that people will share experiences all the time.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Don't ever stop training. It's always a learning experience. That was one of the reasons why I even started this podcast, just to keep me connected when I was in between jobs, just to stay connected to the public information field. So, all right, let's lighten this up. Rapid fire questions. You ready?
All right, we'll try it.
Texting or talking?
Talking.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Caramel.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Adult drink of choice?
I just finished chemo, so I don't get to drink that much, but I would say I really like lemon drops.
Oh, nice. What would be your superpower if you could have one?
Invisibility.
Ask permission or beg for forgiveness?
Ooh, situational dependence, I guess I would say. Sometimes it's good to ask for forgiveness. Sometimes or beg for forgiveness, and sometimes it's good to ask for permission.
Yep, I agree. Where do you want to travel the most?
I've traveled 50 countries so far.
Wow.
Antarctica is on my list.
Yeah, I'd like to really see what's really down there.
Yeah, I want to see the penguins.
I want to see the penguins, the pyramids, and all that other stuff that's allegedly down there. Okay, yeah. If you could have coffee with any historical figure, living or deceased, who would it be?
George Washington.
I like that one. That's a different one. Final thoughts. What key points would you like our listeners to take from today's interview?
I hope that some key points that they take is just, hey, I got to think about this, or I got to think about that, or I like the way she addressed that. I hope they kind of take some stuff and can build it into their own. I never want anybody to repeat anything I'm doing. I want them to take something and be like, I like that, but I can make it better. And then come back and show me how you made it better so I can steal it from you and copy it and do it too. So I hope that's, and that's what people can take. Or if you're new to this, be like, oh, you know what? I'm getting a little bit more comfortable just hearing some of the stuff she talked about. It's stuff I already do. I know, oh, okay, this is making more sense.
Right. Steph, you said you do training a lot in California and in Arizona. How does that come into play? How does that happen?
So I am a FEMA trainer. So I am a trainer for 952. I teach the 952, the all hazard public information. I'm also 388 advanced public information officer trainer. I don't even live in California, but that is I'm sponsored out of that region. I'm sponsored by a national forest to be on the team. And then Arizona is just, the Southwest. I know a lot of the teams down there. I've worked down there a lot. So I come down, I work with them and help them. And I just get in that circle. You get in that circle. The PIO world is a smaller circle than people think it is. So you get into that circle and people are like, oh, I do it too. I'm like, you know what? I need this skill. I know who can do it. I call the person up, like, are you available? Okay, perfect. I'm putting a resource order in for you. So you get to know who's got good skills and who can do what. Like I'm here in Arizona now. I'm not working on one of the fires that they have, but I'm helping one of the prevention education teams. And that's just more skill building for me for when I'm going out to an incident. I can be like, you know what? On the education team, we did A, B, and C. Let's kind of incorporate that on this incident if it works.
Right. Excellent. How could people best reach out if they want to connect or follow up with anything they heard today?
They can email me if they'd like. My email is Stephanie_Bishop at firenet.gov. So that's STEPHANIE_Bishop BISHOP at firenet.gov. Or they can look for me at LinkedIn and friend me and message me that way.
And I will add all that in the show notes.
Awesome.
Stephanie, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a great time.
That's all for this week. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get notified on the latest episode. If you are listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, please give us a review. Any review is appreciated. To support our efforts with the PIO podcast, you can click on the support button in the show notes, and any donation is appreciated. Thank you.